Hello and welcome to another video. So in today's video, we are going to set up automatic deploys with GitHub, Heroku, and for our application, we're going to just build a simple application, which is an e-commerce application, simple, where we'll be fetching some data from a Django-based backend, and we'll serve that data to the client using a Next.js frontend. Now, for the frontend, as I said, you're going to be using Next.js. Now, you might ask yourself why Next.js, and if you hop over to that documentation, and I'll make sure to leave a link to that in the description section below, there are very many good reasons why you should be using Next.js in 2020 or 2021 as per se. So why Next.js? There are all these nice and juicy reasons why you should be using Next.js. One of my most favorite is static site generation and static site or server-side rendering as it is. Now for our front-end framework or our UI library, we'll be using Chakra UI. Now to set up Chakra UI, it's really easy. Hop over to the official site, which is chakraui.com, and if we go to the documentation and getting started page, all we need to do is to install via npm or yarn, depending on the package manager that you're using. And after that, we'll need to import the Chakra provider so that we can wrap our entire application over, or we can wrap that around our application so that for Chakra UI to work correctly, as they say here. So if we hop over to our code, now in here I have two applications set up. One of them is the Next.js application and the other is the Django application. If we look at the Next.js application, this is the app structure. We have this pages directory, the public directory, which in essence holds the images that all the files that you want to be public. Now be sure to make sure that the files that you put in this public folder, they will be exposed, meaning all the files in here will be publicly visible, such as the favicons and all those images in there. And then we have the styles, our package.json. If we hop over to the package.json file, we have Chakra UI, Next.js, React, and all that good stuff. So we are good to go. Now to start off with, we'll need to spin up the Next.js server right away, and we do that with npm run dev, which is an npm script that is inside the package.json. Now to start, we have the dev script which runs the dev server. We have the build script which creates an optimized production build. Then you can run the npm run start script to serve the build application. All right. So as the dev server warms up, we can hop over to our Django application and set up the backend real quick. Now for the Django backend, I have this main application which is auto deploy, which is the application that we are trying to set up. And the goal of this tutorial is to mainly show you how you can deploy real world applications. All right. So if we hop over to our settings.py file, now I went ahead and removed all the comments. I have import OS at the top there, all the good stuff. Then we have our app which is created, which is our catalog app. I added it to the installed applications. Now since we'll be fetching data, we'll need course headers, which is short for course cross origin resource sharing. Now you'll need that because we'll be fetching data from another endpoint, which is localhost port 3000. And to create our API, we are going to use our REST framework, which is the Django REST framework. Now make sure to include the course headers middleware, which is also provided in the documentation, and we include the allow all from the course origin allow all as equal to true, so that we can allow all endpoints querying data to a Django backend. So our settings.py file is set. Now what we can do is start by creating our models so that we can serve our application. Now, if we hop over to the models, now for an e-commerce website or a large e-commerce site, if we look at the entire site, there are maybe thousands or hundreds of models, if I say that. But if we look at the specific item model, what are the attributes that you might find on an item? You'll need the price, you'll need the discount price, the title itself, and the image. Since this is just a simple application, we're going to do just a simple model class item, and which will inherit from models.model. That, and for the fields, may do like that, class item. Now for our item model, as I said, we'll need the title, which will be a character field, so models.character field. And for our character field, we can set the maximum length to be something like, let's say, to be safe, we can do 500 characters. And for the price, let's do an integer field, or you can just go ahead and do a float field and whatnot. We can also do the discount price. Oops, I had a typo, discount, like that. We can have the discount price. Then let's do the image as models.image field. Then we can set a default image, default as default.jpg, like that. And after setting the default image, we can also set up the upload folder so that we can upload all those item images to a specified folder. So we can set upload to, and that needs to be, let's just call it item images. Now all that looks fine. We can go ahead and define our string method, double underscore string of self. Then we are going to return self.title to start with. So there is our simple model. We have our title, price, discount price, and all that. Now we need to go ahead and register that model inside our admin. So from .models, or from .models, we can import our item model. Then we can register it like that. So let's register our item model inside our admin panel so that we can add our items through the admin panel. So a little check on the models, title, and whatnot. If we get any errors, we'll just fix them along the way. So our model is set, but we haven't run the migrations just yet. Now, if we go to the API, I have a folder named API with 3 files, serializers.py, URLs, and our views. Now, there's nothing in these files. I just created them. We can start off with the serializers file. So let's import our serializers from REST framework. So from REST underscore framework, REST framework, we can import serializers. Make sure I spell that right. Then we can set up our class or our item product list serializer, which we'll just call it like that. We can do item list or product list serializer like that, which will inherit from serializers.model serializer. Now, if you've ever dealt with Django forms before, You might be familiar with this. So inside the class itself, we set up our class meta, and we can specify the model to be, then the model itself, we can import it. So from our catalog app, so from catalog.models, let's import our item model and set it right there. Now, what fields do we want to return to the user when we query that data from our API? So the fields, I'll set that to a tuple. Now the first item in that, or the first item in the fields tuple, is the ID. We make sure to return the ID of that specific product. To check the fields that we need, we can go back to the model itself. Now for a start, we can just grab all the fields so that let's paste them there. So we have our fields in there. Now this is where this ends. We have the fields ID, title, the price, the discount price, and the image. Of course, if you have some fields that require additional formatting, you can do all that formatting or creating serializer method fields and all that. But this is just a simple application. But in a real world application, of course, you will need to do all that. Now inside our views, we can also import the serializers that we just created. But first, let's import some permissions from REST framework. So from REST framework.permissions, we can import allow any. There are a bunch of them. Is admin user is authenticated, but right now, since we don't have authentication set up for application, we can just use allow any. And also we can import some views. So from REST framework.generics, let's import the list API view, and which is good enough since we'll be just listing our application. Now from .serializers, let's import our serializer, import the product list serializer. Now we can go ahead and create our first view, which will be a class-based view, and that will be, let's just call it a home view, and that will inherit from list to that needs to be list API view. Now for our permissions or permission classes, this needs to be a tuple, and we can put allow any as the first item in that tuple. And for our serializer class, we can use our product list serializer. Now the last item is the query set. Since we are dealing with the item model, first we need to import it, and from that needs to be from our catalog app. So from catalog.models, let's import our item model, and for query set, it will be item a query on all the objects in that item model. So it will be item.objects.all. Simple as that. Now, since we have our home view, we can get it and include it inside our URLs. Now from Django.urls, so we can import the path module. Then we can set up some URL patterns. So URL patterns, then we can set up a path to, let's say, products dash list uses home view dot as underscore view, since it's a class-based view, and then we can give it a name of let's say just home. Now home view, we can import it from catalog.api.views, or you can just do a simple import from .views import our home view. Nice and beautiful. So this is no way that Django knows about this urls.py file inside our catalog application. So inside the root application autodep, we need to make Django know about that urls file. So any path that goes to slash API, so slash API, will need to include, and that needs to be inside a string, to include catalog.api.urls. Now, this include function, we can also import it from Django URLs, and we are good to go. So close off all that, close off the file, close off the views. The serializers look good. We can close everything. Now, remember, we didn't make the migrations, so there's no way that Django knows about our item model and all that. So first things first, let's view our front end and see how it looks like. Then we'll switch back to the backend. So we have a server that is running on localhost port 3000, and it is the initial page that gets rendered when you create the next application at first. So welcome to Next.js. Get started by editing these pages in /pages index, and then you can view the documentation and whatnot. So if we hop over back to our code, now I'll create a new instance of the terminal here so that we can create or make our migrations and create a super user. Now to do that, I'll do python manage.py make migrations. Now you have to be careful here to add the catalog application at the end of that, so that it doesn't create duplicates database files. Now if we didn't put that, you'll see you might run into errors, so that you will find that you're ending up with two database files instead of just one db.sqlite3. So we're going to make our migrations, our initial migrations on the catalog application. Give it a second there. Alright, it asks us we need to create a model item. Nice. So after that, we can just run migrate, and that should get underway with applying the migrations. So give it a second. Now as you can see, it created the file, which is our database file, which is the db.sqlite3, and after that we can go ahead and create our super user. So after that, let's do python manage.py create super user, one word, like that, so that we can log into our admin panel. So I'll give that user a name, an email address, then a password, and our super user was created successfully. So we can log into our admin panel and create some items. So python manage.py run server, like that, and that should start a local development server on port 8000. So we can hit that route. Now as you can see, we're getting an error, page not found, since Django only knows about these two URLs, the admin URL and the API URL. So if you go to slash, let's say, API, as you can see, the way that the URLs are set up is, if we just go to catalog API, then URLs. If we go to, and that is in the root URLs. If we go to just API without the forward slash or the trailing slash, nothing is going to happen. So we must include the trailing slash at the end there. And as you can see, there's only one route under that API route, which we need as product lists. And product lists, as you can see, we're getting some errors because we haven't configured our static root and our media root. So let's dive into our settings and do just that. All right, so our static URL is set. Then we need to set our media URL for files, which will be /media, like that. And let's do our static root. So static underscore root, that will be os.path.join, and then we'll join the base directory with static files, and that will just create a new folder under the base directory and name it static files. You can also do the media root os.path.join base directory, and we'll join that with media. Now, since we've set the media root and the static root, we'll need to do a little configuration inside our root urls.py so that we can serve those static files and those media files. So from Django.conf, we can import our settings module. Then also from similar URL, so from Django.urls.import the static command. Now we can check and say if we are in debug mode. So if settings.debug, now we have to figure out if we are doing Heroku, that needs to be debug like that. If settings.debug, we'll add or we'll append to the URL patterns. So URL patterns plus equals to, then we can do static like that. The document underscore root will be also from settings.media underscore root, like that. So this needs to be document. All right, so settings.media URLs, and our document root is our media root. Nice and beautiful. Close off the settings and the URLs. If we go over to the API product lists and refresh, now as you can see, it's working, but we are getting an empty array, meaning there are no products in our database. So we can hop over to the admin panel and log in as the super user that we just created. Now inside the items, of course there are no items, so I'll take a minute and add some items, and I'll get back to you when I'm done. So I went ahead and created and added some items to the database. We have all these 8 items here. Now if we go back to the code, and we have our items, we have our views, then as we stand, we can set up our front end and fetch that data. So if we hop over to our Next.js application, first things first, we can start by deleting what we don't need. And since we'll be doing a query or fetching data inside our application itself, we don't need to set up this API that is provided by the Next.js. But if you're comfortable doing that, feel free to go ahead and use that. Now, to use Chakra UI inside our components, as I said, we'll need to import let's import the Chakra provider from the Chakra UI React. So from Chakra UI React, we can import the Chakra provider. So that needs to be Chakra provider, like that. As you can see, it's prompted import right there. So we have our Chakra provider there. Now what we need to do is wrap that Chakra provider around our entire component. So Chakra provider, and I'll cut that and paste it there. Save everything. Nice and beautiful. Since we will not be using the CSS that is provided by default, we can as well delete them and get rid of the imports there. If we'll need our CSS, we'll create our own inside the index.js file. We can get rid of probably everything and just return a h1 tag saying that this is the home page. All right, or we can import some components from Chakra UI. We can do import that from at Chakra UI React. I keep forgetting the at symbol. One of them is the heading, and we can replace the h1 tag with the heading and save everything. If we hop over to our browser and go, we can get rid of this that we're not using. If we go to our local host, now nothing was returned, means a return statement is missing. All right, let's hop over to our code and try to fix that. So function return, I missed that trailing. We can do that and everything is fixed. So if you come back, now we have our homepage, nice and beautiful. So what I need to do is to create a container for all the images, and that will need to be, let's just first create the container itself. Now inside our home view, we can import the box component from Chakra UI. Now the box component is essentially a div component. Now, so we're going to start by importing the box component from Chakra UI, and we'll return the box component itself. And inside the box component, we can also use the image component from Chakra UI as well. Inside the box component, we'll have our image, and for the source, since we are using Next.js, we can just put the source as slash, let's say logo.png, and that is going to work since all the files that you put inside your public folder, as I said before, all those files will be publicly accessible. So if you, for any route that will go to your domain slash that image dot the image file or the image types, let's say if we go to slash localhost slash logo.png, we'll see that image popping up in our browser. All right, so we're going to return the image, and then after that we'll do a simple heading with the item title, and after that we can do some price. Now for the currency, since I'm in Nairobi, Kenya, I deal with Kenya shillings, so I'll do something like that, and we can do that. Right, so I'm going to save everything. Now seems to be compiled successfully. Now for the head, we'll deal with that later, so we can get rid of that for now. Now we'll need to provide an image that you can work with. So I've provided this jacket image, so we can just import that directly inside our file. Now this error keeps persisting because for the return statement we need to return all this. So I'll just cut it and paste it in there, save everything. Now we can go directly to our jacket image, jacket.png, nice and beautiful. If we save that, now I keep opening that, we see the image, the item title, and the price. All right, so we can just start by styling all that. Now for the width, we can set the width to let's say the width to 200 pixels and the height to, let's do 300 by 300. 300 by 300 is fine. And the heading, I'll do a font size of about 20 pixels. The height, now the idea is we'll have a discount price and the original price, so that will need to wrap inside Flexbox, and we can import the Flex component from Checker UI, and we can align everything center, that, and all this. So this will be the initial price, so we can do a font size of about 15, or let's do medium to be safe, and we'll do a weight of bold. Now for this, we'll do also a font size of medium, but the weight will be semi-bold, or we can just do a font size of, let's say, 12 pixels. That will be a bit lower. And for the styling, we need that to be strut through, so we can do text to decoration line dash through. Nice. If we check, everything now looks like an e-commerce website. All right, so as I checked, we'll need to add some margin to the left of that. We can do a margin left of, let's say, 3. Now this is beautiful. Now there's a cool package which is React Slick. Now I'm sure most of you have worked with it, but that would be cool if we have the images being in a sliding manner or in a slider. So I'll hop over to npm.js package React Slick, and I'm going to install that. I'll close off the Django server, open another instance of the terminal there. We're going to install React Slick. To React Slick and Slick carousel for the CSS files. Right? Make sure you get that right. Hit enter. Now, as that installs, we can hop over to the documentation and see how to get about that. We can import the slider from React Slick, which is nice. Then for the settings, let's copy everything like that. Settings, dots, we'll set dots true, infinite to true, speed, we'll change the speed to 3000, slides to show, let's do 4, slides to scroll 1, we'll set autoplay to true, and save, then autoplay speed, we'll also set that to 3000 milliseconds. Now that should do it for now. And instead of var, we can use const. Const of settings const, not constant, whatever the heck that is. So inside our slider, we can copy the slider like that, and we can pass in all the settings. Now let's do slider like that, and we'll wrap the slider around our box. Now let's also do a box outside, and then we can set the width to 100 viewport width. All right, so we have our slider, which is nice and beautiful, but right now I guess it will just be displaying one image. If we check, and it will display on top of each other like that, unless you have multiple images. So right now we are good to go to fetching our images or our items from our database. Now inside Next.js, if you go to their documentation under data fetching. Now, there are multiple ways of data fetching, but if you want to do server-side rendering coupled with static site generation, and also that which is inspired with SWR, which is stale while revalidating. Now, get static props, which is a new method in Next.js version 10, also has provisions for revalidation, which will refresh the page 1 second at a time, and that will fetch new data every second. And that is good to go. So to fetch our data, we'll need to export an asynchronous function, get static props, and default function home. We can get rid of the export there and do it at the bottom after the close export default function home, after the close of the get static props. Now, for our URLs, remember we are fetching HTTP localhost port 8000/API/product list. Now, what I like to do is create a new folder called utils. Now, inside utils, we'll create a new file called constants.js. Now, inside our constants, we'll export a const of, let's say, local host, which will just be HTTP 127.0.0.1, then port 8000, then slash, then we'll do another export, and that will be our API and endpoint, which will be /API. Then for our endpoint, export constant, and oops, I meant to type endpoint. So for our endpoint, it will be a combination of the localhost, then the API. All right. So we have our endpoint, which is API, and then we can also export a final constant, which is our products list URL. Now you can go ahead and set it up the way you want, but this is how I like to set it up when I'm working on a real world application. Now this is going to be the endpoint, then after the endpoint we'll go to /product/list. All right, now that looks fine, as I can see. Make sure I don't have any typos. Then right here we can import the product list URL, and we are going to fetch from that URL, which is the product list URL. Then our items will await response.json. Then we'll return our items inside the properties. Get rid of the comments. We'll be validating in 1 second. What that means is every 1 second new data will be coming in, and we will optimistically refresh our UI. All right, so inside the properties of our application or our component, we'll have our items. We can get the items in there. Now we can map through all our items and display each item. We can display the data for each specific item. So we can do a map. We can call items.map, And we are going to iterate through all those items, loop through all those items, and find each item. And as we loop through all those items, for each item we want to return this box component, which is essentially that div that we saw with the image and the title of that item. And since we are looping through the data, we'll have to include a key prop, and that will be item.id, which is nice. And in there we can pass in the title, item.title. And again, these are the fields that we included inside our models. So those are the title, the price, the discount price, and the image. You can copy that. Make sure I don't have to type all the way. So cash to item dot discount price, then we can do dot to local string to make sure that we are including the 1000 separator. Now this is what should be there, and that should be item dot price dot to local string. So everything seems nice. And if we hop over to our application, local cannot read property map of undefined. All right. And while we are at it, I failed to include the image, which will be, let's say, item.image. Now, Chakra UI has provisions for a fallback source on the image component, such that if the item image doesn't load, you have a fallback image, which will be our jacket. So jacket.png. Now, this is because we need to include the ternary operator on the items image, on the items property there, so that if we don't have any items, we don't map or we return none. Right? Save everything. If we go back, now we are getting this error because our Django server is down, which is typical. And as I said, or as we were fetching our data, we let our server, or our server was down, so make sure our server is back up, which is nice and beautiful. I can save that to make sure everything is back up, compiled correctly. If you go back to this page, and it should refresh automatically because of auto or hot reloading, which is also enabled in Next.js. But let's just do a hard refresh. Now this error, it's a fetch error, and it's arising from the URL. If we check, oh, it's the trailing slash. If we check our constants, now from our URLs, it was /API/product list. Now the way I've set up my URLs, I have a trailing /product list. Now seems like we are getting the data, but let's try to console it out to see if we are getting the entire data. Items, I'll try to log our items. If we go to the console, now the items are coming through, which is nice. We have nothing showing up because if we hop over back to the React Slick documentation, now what I failed to import is the CSS files. So the data is being fetched correctly as we saw, but there's nothing to show because the CSS files aren't rendering. So inside our application, or our _app.js, is where we need to import all our CSS files. I'll make sure to import the Slick carousel, which is the carousel that we need. And inside the settings, I added the dots to false, arrows to false, and set the autoplay speed to about 3000 milliseconds. Now, if we go back, we see our items are displaying as we want them to display. Now, this is as far as I can go when you're setting up your real-world application. So, up to this point, it was just the introduction. Now, the good stuff of what I wanted to show you in this video is what we need to work on. And autoplay, we've set that to true. Autoplay speed, let's just save everything to make sure that everything works correctly before we deploy. All right, okay, so now everything seems to be working out correctly. We have the carousel displaying on top right there. Now, since assuming that you are at this point and you've set up your application correctly, now all you need to do is to set up your Heroku account that you'll need to link up to GitHub. Now, before you can deploy this application, we'll need to create a production build. Now, as it creates the production build, let's close off all those files there. And inside the constants, we'll need to change, or let me add another one. Let's say, let's first of all go ahead and spin up a real Heroku application real fast. So hop over to heroku.com. Now make sure you have your account created. As you can see, I'm already logged in. Here are some applications that are running. I'll go ahead and spin up a Heroku server real fast. Let's do Heroku -git -auto deploy. I doubt that is taken, which isn't. It's available. We can leave the default region to United States, and we are going to create our application. And first things first, as you can see, you are already on the deploy tab. If we go to overview, now this is a free dyno, and the server instances on Heroku are called dynos. So this is a free dyno, and you're paying $0 a month. Now, to reach at this point, when you create your account, you need to provide a credit card. Now, it's not going to be charged since this is a free account, but first things first, hop over to the settings tab, and we'll need to go ahead and set some settings for our application. One of them is adding a build pack. Now, this build pack specifies the framework for your application. Now, since we'll be doing a Django application, we can go with Heroku Python. Your new build pack configuration will be used when this app is deployed, which is nice and beautiful. And we've set Heroku Python. And another one is the configuration of variables. All right. One of them that we need to set is disable underscore collect static, like that, and the value we need to set that to 1. So disable collect static, one word, we need to set that to 1, which is nice. And if we hop over to the deploy tab, now there are 3 methods that we can use to deploy application. We can use the Heroku CLI or connect to a GitHub repository, which is the method that we prefer. All right, now under the connecting to the GitHub repository, it's going to connect to the GitHub account that is linked to the Heroku account that you signed in with. Now, if we search for the GitHub repository that we want to search with, which is not created yet, but as you can see, these are the repositories that are in my GitHub account. All right, we can go to GitHub and create a new repository, and let's name that repository Heroku Git. Heroku Git is fine. The description is we can do auto deploy. Since I'm lazy, I'll just do auto deploy. We'll make it public and go ahead and create that repository. Now, Before we go ahead and start building our application, we first need to deploy our application to Heroku, so that when you build our application, our Next.js application, and deploy it, it will fetch data from our live application. Now let me show you what I mean. Before we deploy it to Heroku, we need to create some 3 files inside our project folder. One of those files, which are Heroku specific, is the proc file, which is short form for process file, and this will just describe the web process that the Heroku Dino instance should use when running your application. Now we're going to use GUnicorn to serve that web traffic. Then we'll specify a path to our WSGI file, which is inside the, if I can find it, inside the autodep.wsgi. So autodeploy.wsgi, then we do --log -file and then space and dash. Make sure it's GUnicorn. Save that, and then we'll create a new file, name it runtime.txt. In here we can specify our Python version. Now we can do Python 3.8.6 just to be safe, and the last file is our requirements.txt. So requirements.txt, had a typo there, requirements.txt. So I went ahead and created a requirements.txt file and pasted in the requirements that we need. Now, if you don't know the requirements that you need for your application, you can just do pip freeze. Now, I highly recommend if let's just do pip list. So pip list instead of pip freeze. Now, I highly recommend that you set up a virtual environment so that you can use the specific requirements for your project. Now, as you can see, I have a bunch of them, and this is because I didn't set up the virtual environment for my application. Now, if you've set up the virtual environment correctly, you'll have the specific requirements that you'll need for your application. Now, I'll make sure to link these requirements if you're following along in the description section below. So make sure our dev server is running as well, and we have our requirements.txt file. And for our local host, we'll need to add in the Heroku, and we can get the Heroku URL right from our application name. So it will be our application name.herokuapp.com, right? And that needs to go there, .herokuapp.com. That will be our local host. So we can go ahead and comment out that, and we can also copy that and add it inside the allowed host in our settings.py file. Make sure you don't forget that, and that needs to be inside there, and we can add in our local host also to be safe, right? Heroku git auto deploy.herokuapp.com. Save that, and we can save our constants. Now, inside the gitignore file, as you can see, I have the files, the huge files that we don't need to commit. One of them is the node modules, and this .vercel app, can get rid of it. It was created by default when you created the application. But if you don't want to commit all these files to the Heroku, to your Heroku application, you can also list them inside here in your gitignore. So first things first, we'll need to collect our static files. So let's do python manage.py collect static, and that what that's going to do is it will create a new folder, static files, with all our static files. As you can see right here, we have the files for the admin and also for the REST framework. Now that went through, and if we want to deploy to Heroku for the first time, I'll use Heroku CLI, so that once we have our initial application, we can connect it to GitHub. So hop over to using the CLI. Now, if you don't have the CLI installed, you can just click on that link there. It will install. It will get you to this page where you can download it for your specific operating system. Now, I already have that installed. So first things first, we need to log into our CLI so that we are authenticated and we can start our deployments. All right, I'll log into my CLI, and what that command is going to do is it will pop a new window in the browser so that we can authenticate ourselves through the command line. All right, give it a sec there. So once we hit that button, we can close this page and return to the CLI, and we should be logged in. As we are logged in. So if we go back to the steps, we need to initialize an empty Git repository, right? And then set the remote. So let's do git init like that, and then set the remote endpoint. And if we go back to the instructions, we'll add everything, commit and add a message, and then we'll push to the master branch. So I'll do a git add on that. That might take a while since we are doing this for the first time. So give it a sec, and I can just inside the git ignore, we can add the .next application or the .next folder, which is also a huge folder, which I forgot. Can go back and start again. So git add everything, then we can commit, and say let's just do initial commit. After that, let's deploy. So git push Heroku master, and this is going to take a while, so I'll just fast forward, and when it's done, we can go through the process. So that seems to have gone through. Now if we go through the process, as you can see, building source Python app detected. Now this is because of the build packs that we set inside the Heroku application. Now it installs the requirements with pip, and after that compresses everything and it releases our version. Now we can open our application using the Heroku CLI command, Heroku open, and it will pop up a new window in the browser, a new tab, so that we can view our application. All right, give it a sec there, and we have our application which is live. We can log into the admin section, and we are logged in. Nice and beautiful. Before we deploy our Next.js application, first things first, we need to create an optimized production build. Now to do that, we need to run the build script, npm script. So if we do npm run build, what that's going to do is it will create an optimized production build for application. If there are any statically generated pages, it will also do that, and when it's done, I'll show you what I mean. So that went through, and as you can see, we only have one site which is incrementally statically generated. And what that means is, if you remember the validation that we set up to 1 second, that is because of the incremental static regeneration. Now, the sites or the pages that are marked in the full dot, those are the statically generated. As you can see, it combines HTML plus JSON. If we go to the next, then server pages, what that means is if we go to the index, we also have the index.html and the index.json file. Now, if we go to the HTML, now if you try to serve up this HTML file, you'll get a meme type error, and that is because you can't host directly Next.js on Django as you would do with React or any other framework. Now, what I recommend or what I would do in this case is deploy Next.js, a Next.js application to the platform that it was made for, and that platform is Vercel. Now, if you've never heard of Vercel before, don't worry, I'll hold your hand and show you how to do it. Now, to start off with, I'll go to my project folder. So I went ahead and deleted the .git folder, and so now we don't have any connection to our Heroku application. We just deployed it right there. Now to deploy to Vercel, which is the platform that Next.js was made for, let's go to vercel.com. Now this is my dashboard. First things first, you'll need to go ahead and create your account, and for the free account, you don't need to provide a credit card. It's absolutely free. Now, to start off with, you'll need to install the Vercel CLI. Now, this is the command line interface that is built with Node.js. You can also do it with Yarn depending on your package manager. So I already have it installed. Go ahead and do npm install globally the Vercel CLI, and after that, what you're going to do is, after you have that installed correctly, you're going to type in just Vercel, and it will ask you to log in if you're doing it for the first time, or it will just auto deploy. So let's type in Vercel, and it will set up and auto deploy. Yes, we want to set up and auto deploy that. Link to an existing project, no. What's your project name? Deploy, yes. In which directory is it located? Yes. So it's going to set up a project and upload our files and deploy them to the command. So overriding the run build command, we don't want to override that. We'll accept all the defaults. Now, if we go to our dashboard and go to projects, these are the projects that are running currently. But as you can see, our deploy project, if we click on that and go to the deployments tab, as you can see, it's building right now. If we go to the building page and downloading deployment files, now this is going to go through your files, deploy all your files, and also create an optimized production build. And I'll see you when it's done. So that happened pretty fast. Now if we go back to the top, it retrieves all the files, installs the dependencies that are specified in the package.json file, and after that it starts creating an optimized production build by running the npm run build command. And after that, also the sites which are statically generated are generated, and we have our application which is served. Now if you go, we have our status which is ready. Now if we visit our application, we see, and boom, we have everything set up right there. Now the part or the aim of this tutorial was to show you how we can set up automatic deploys so that when we make changes to this application and deploy our code to GitHub, it is automatically deployed to our Vercel application. Let me show you what I mean. To start off with, we are going to start by creating our repository, which we did Heroku Git, And if we go back to our root directory and make sure I close that, we'll also need to get rid of the .git folder that is created when we deploy this application to the Vercel platform. So I'll get rid of that and I'll see you when it's done. So now that everything is clean, we've removed the .git folder again. If we check our .gitignore file, we have this .vercel folder that is added by default. Now, if we check our project.json, we can say that we have our project ID and our origin ID, and that is specific to your project itself. GitHub, we have our repository. We want to link it to our application. All right. So first things first, we'll initialize an empty repository, git init, and again I'm just following these steps right here. We'll add everything, git add dot, and that is going to take a while depending on the size of your application, and I'm going to pause. I'll see you when it's done. So that took a while, and after that we'll commit everything. So git commit -m and then we'll do initial commit as always. That is going to commit our files. After that, we can set the branch. So git branch -m -main, and then after that we can set our remote origin, which is set, and then git push origin main, and this is going to push our application to this GitHub repository, and that might take a while also depending on the size of our application. So I'll pause and come back when it's done. So that went on pretty fast, and if we do, let me close off that. I'll toggle the terminal bar to so if we refresh our repository, now we should have our application right in here. We have all our files, we have the profile, all the Heroku specific files, and we have our application which we can also deploy to Vercel. Now, if we go to the deploy tab of Heroku, now if we go to the GitHub tab that I specified before, and as I said before, you can set up a Heroku pipeline which also has provisions for auto deployments, but you have to set up that correctly so that your application passes continuous integration so that it can move to production. So our repository name is Heroku_git. Okay, so that is our repository. We can connect it, and after that, if we go scroll to the bottom, we have our branches, or we can choose the branch to deploy, which is the main branch. And after that, this is the fun part. We can just, by a tap of this button, we have enabled automatic deploys. Now if we go to Vercel also, if we go to overview, or let's go to projects, and as you can see, it says git not connected. So if we click that, we can connect to our Heroku_git repository. That needs to be Heroku_git. We can save that, the production branch, we can set that to main, and then by default every commit to the main branch will trigger an automatic deploy. We can also save that. Repository default, we can set that to main and save. So nice and beautiful. So every deploy that we do to our main branch, it will trigger an automatic deploy of our application. Now what I mean is, if we make any change to our application and deploy that to Heroku, alright, so if we go to pages/index, and let's say we make a change, and what I need to do is to import the divider that I'll be using. Now before the slider, let's say we want to add a heading tag and set this to be simple ecom auto deploy site, just any arbitrary information that we set right there. Then we can do the divider. Okay, so we have that divider imported on top right there. We have our index file which is modified, and if we pop our terminal, we can add everything. So git add dot, then we can commit dash m, then dash added header, then we can do git push. Therefore, if we refresh our repository, we should see the new changes. One of them is the added header. Now under environments, we see we have this production environment, and we can see the status is pending. If we refresh again, we can see it's only one environment. Refresh again. If we go to Heroku and see our overview pane, we can see it's building, but it's not refreshing on the GitHub side of things. But as you can see, we have two environments. One of them is Heroku Git auto deploy and the production environment. Now the production environment is the Vercel environment, and the Git auto deploy is the Heroku environment. Now everything seems to be done as at now. If we refresh, the status should be active for both of them. Now if we go to our Vercel dashboard, and if we go to our deploy and go to deployments, now we have this deploy that had finished a minute ago, and as you can see, the message also reflects here. Now if you go to the overview and visit that page, and we see simple ecom auto deploy site, and as you can see, we didn't have to deploy also to Vercel and Heroku. We just did an auto deploy to our GitHub repository site, and the changes were made instantly. So now that our application is live, you might wonder that why should we go through all that hassle to set this up. As I said from the beginning, there are many ways to do this. This is what I find working best for me when I'm dealing with Django and Next.js. Now, there are a ton of ways that I can do this automation simple, and one of them is creating auto deploy hooks, which I can do in another video if you let me know in the description section below. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.